And I am pleased to introduce Claire Oswalt and Julia Haft-Candell. Claire lives and works in Austin, Texas. She creates sweeping and expansive paintings and collages that are informed by minimalism, abstraction, and landscape. Moon Math is Claire's third exhibition here at the gallery and her first in our new location that we've been in since this past fall. Moon Math includes a suite of new paintings and preparatory studies that refer to Claire's ongoing interest in the systems and structures, both science and metaphysics, that provide us with a possible mapping, choreography, and visualization to both understand and attempt to comprehend the world around us. Julia Haft-Candell is a Bay Area native who now lives and works in Los Angeles. Hold is Julia's first exhibition with the gallery. She works across media, but her practice is rooted in clay-based sculpture, and she frequently incorporates multi-layered glazes, often with bronze and gold flourishes, into sculptural objects whose forms are derived from a unique visual lexicon comprising specific symbols and motifs such as combs, hands, chains, and infinity loops. Inquiry guides her practice, and she continually experiments with new methods, forms, and materials. Guided by an evolving personal philosophy she calls the infinite, her works in the pedagogy, and informing her methods as an educator are rooted in the ideals that constitute this ever-evolving fictional world. Ladies.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks, Rebecca. I guess I'm going to start off and just say that I'm really happy to be opening this show here as my third show, but this is the first time that I get to open with Julia, which is really neat for me. Julia and I did not know each other before this show, but I encountered her work in 2018 was the first time I was in New York at Frieze. And she was showing in a very cool booth with Forrest Best, and whom I love. And I saw those wild, lopsided ceramic pieces, and my tongue rolled out of my head, and I was like, it was cool. I jumped right into a conversation with the gallery about her. And then I think later that year I was going to go to LA. I tried to get a studio visit with her, and she declined. No, I think it's really neat. But now here we are, full circle, and yeah, we get to open the show together. So this is a bit impromptu and improvised, so we'll just see where this goes. But I wanted to start off by asking Julia, here we are in different disciplines. How did you end up in sculpture? How did you land there?
I think by accident. I started in drawing and painting and drew like my whole life. And then at UC Davis, I took a ceramics class just on a whim. And it was like drawing, but in 3D. It was like only sculpture-based ceramics. It was like a fairly experimental place to learn ceramics. Like we didn't have wheel throwing classes, so it was just very much like hand building, and like we would make a big pile of clay and kind of like sculpt things just without a lot of technical instruction. And it was just like I could make my drawings in 3D. And I had been in my painting classes. I remember I was like kind of like finger painting with the oils. My teacher was like, wear gloves, please. Like oil paints were not good for my hands, but I think it was just the ability to make something that I had like an image of in my head, but to be able to make it in 3D was what got me hooked.
Did you feel like you had more control in the matter rather than in 2D?
Maybe.
Or did you like the loss of control? Maybe
I like the loss of control, and I think I felt a little restricted. I still feel a little restricted when I'm within a frame. And I still go back to drawing all the time, and I try to go back to painting sometimes, but it's hard. It's hard for me. Like it's not. Yeah, I don't know how to.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed by painters' ability, your ability, specifically to like compositionally to be able to figure out composition within
Yeah.
a rectangle or, you know, any sort of framed
Mhm.
space.
I totally understand that. And when I work, I don't start with any rectangle, and it goes out, and I don't know if it's going to go vertical, horizontal, wherever, and I just keep going and then I impose the frame later on the work and find the frame.
That's really
Yeah.
interesting.
But I feel the same way.
So how did you get into painting? Why painting?
I've always been able to draw since I was a young kid, but I never sat down, and I was very athletic, like an impatient child, and so I didn't spend a lot of time painting and drawing, and I wasn't a doodler, none of that. But I knew I could do that. I knew that was a skill I had. Anyway. So then when I got to college, I minored in art for the hell of it. And I was like, oh, this is so natural for me. And drawing led to painting, and then I went back to drawing. I just really liked the execution and the refinement of the graphite. I used to work in graphite for a really long time. And then, but most of my most of my work has always had an element of sculpture or structure, you know, and I used to work in woodworking and drawing, and now I work in sewing and painting. But that feels, I like working with my hands at the same time. Like I can't just draw and paint, I don't think. The collage work is real quick, and moving the pieces of paper around.
That's interesting. I didn't know about the woodworking, because that I think is really connected to the shapes that you cut and sew together.
Very much so.
I could see that in wood as well.
Yeah, we talked about my work was very different, and it changed when I had kids, because I had a different time constraint, and I couldn't spend the amount of time that I spent on single works of art. So somehow I know exactly how, but I got to painting, and it was a winding road.
One thing that we found we have in common that we didn't know was the way that we work from kind of like miniatures. Because I was not aware of Claire's process in this way, where she's making these studies and then the paintings are like direct from the studies. So they have this like very quick gestural feel, but they're not really. They're coming from something specific, and I think that's really interesting, that paradox. And I also work from small maquettes, like I have a sketch and then I make a maquette, and I work because of the way you have to make a large sculpture in clay. It has to be hollow, and they're coil built. You have to really build it slowly from the ground up in coils, and so there's this like also an attempt to make something feel very spontaneous, like the maquette, like the model, but have to make it very slowly with weight and gravity and all the technical difficulties along the way.
Which brings me to this idea that both of us have talked about opposition in our work. And what I fell in love with your work also was she's dealing with a very weighty material, and it feels rooted always to the pedestal, but then she plays with gravity quite a bit, and it feels like it's extending up with this levity or slip sliding down, and I love that static, non-static quality of yours, and the push pull of the binding that she works with as well. I get that, and I love that with my work too, that I have the pull, the coming together as I sew, but with the gestures and everything, it feels like, and the stretching, it also has that extension where it feels like it could be broken at any point. I feel like we have a lot of crossover there.
There is. I think that this idea of spontaneity, but like planned spontaneity, is really interesting, but also
Yeah.
like confusing. Like, how do you plan spontaneity?
Totally. People are thrown off quite a bit when they ask me, and I tell them, I know this mark. I know what that mark's going to look like ahead of time.
Yeah, that's really
And so
unexpected.
I paint a gesture that was born within a very quick moment, and it becomes extended in that way in time.
It's almost like making an archive of a gesture,
Yeah.
like
And
a
you're-
record of the
yeah.
gesture.
And I like the honoring of that quick moment, because it was just a blip, you know? And then you're like, oh, how did we get to that moment? Let's go back there and relive it and extend it, and then it's now recorded in perpetuity.
It's really nice. On a very, I mean, the colors in both of the exhibitions we did not plan.
No,
Um,
but partly why I fell in love with your work.
Yeah, and
Like-
yeah, I know it makes sense that we have a good color sense. But I was really pleased to see
Yeah.
that connection as well.
Can you talk a little bit about what you're painting on top of your forms, which they're very feminine and very rounded and remind me kind of Picabia, of like his women, how they all intersect with one another. I don't know if anyone's ever told you that. Okay. Yeah, where does that come from?
Well, the legs, for example, like all of the imagery in the work is recorded as part of my glossary of terms and symbols. So I have this list of 27 now, different symbols that I go back and forth from and to, like legs or drops or hands, feelers, there's some other ones in there. There's on the piece that's like has the finger bulb in there, has what I call a mood chart, which is like this kind of like a chart of a mood swing.
Wait, did you make that up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All of these are, I mean, they're not all made up, like a leg exists obviously,
Yes.
but like all of them, some of them are made up. All of the definitions are things I have creatively written. So combining personal memory with socio-political events or pop culture. And there's a written glossary, but it mostly serves as like a grounding for me to go back to, because I feel like the work that I make has a lot of different things that don't always feel connected together, so I use the glossary as a way to connect them together. And so all of the imagery of the works themselves, the shapes, but also the motifs on top of them, which have gold, the gold in the glaze work, is referenced back in the glossary. So you can, like, if you have the glossary, which is not an actual book yet, but it will be, or it was a zine at some point. And
Oh, cool.
at the last show I did, it was a series of drawings with text. You can see a image and then go, like a motif, and
I
then
love
go
that.
look at
Which
the
I also have
glossary.
to say, she loves science fiction.
I do, I love science.
So as you know, in a lot of science fiction novels, you can refer to a glossary.
I love a glossary.
I love that.
I love reference. I like legends and keys on maps.
Yeah.
That all kind of like, yeah, I love any sort of extra information.
Yeah, and I love that creative language that you're connecting. I mean, you're creating on your own. Huh.
Yeah, the idea is that you don't need to know this information to enjoy the work, but then if you're interested, there's this like backstory that you can delve into.
Totally.
Yeah, which I feel like I got excited. That's why I got so excited by knowing that your studies were the beginning, like the origin of these, because there's
Yeah.
this, you don't need to know that, but once you know that, it adds this whole other layer of
Yeah.
context to you and the work.
Yeah. Well, okay, and so let's talk about how a piece is born.
Yeah.
I mean, we went into my work. This happens very quick. It's improvised. I don't know where I have no idea where I'm going.
Yeah.
When I start a work and I see the work, the image or some sort of imagery or some sort of maybe form that I connect with starts to emerge, and that's when I hone in on it and start to refine it. And then this becomes an execution that's like a whole different side of my brain, completely. So can you talk about how work is just initially born?
Yeah.
Like, do you know where you're going ahead of time?
Sometimes, and sometimes it changes. But usually it starts as like a very, very rough sketch in, pencil. And then will become a maquette, but maybe only after a few years of looking back at old sketches. I'll see a sketch in a sketchbook and want to make that into a maquette.
And what do you make the maquette out of?
Clay. So, but it's quick. It's like very rough. I don't have to worry. It's a gesture. I don't have to worry about it, firing it or glazing it. It's just making something that's a 2D image into something 3D. And then if I like the maquette, if that still kind of works for me and feels like something worth pursuing, then I'll make that into a larger sculpture. And then after that, there's the whole issue of clays, of imagery, of motif on top of it. So there's so many different steps along the way where I have to make decisions.
Yeah.
And then I also introduce various things that will confuse or disrupt my own decisions, like glazes that will react in ways that I can't control.
On purpose.
On purpose. And so I won't purposely, I will add things where I don't know what's going to happen.
I love
It's
that.
curveball.
Yeah. Mine's done in opposition.
It is.
Yeah, in reverse.
Yeah.
Huh.
Which sounds really, really satisfying to know what you're going to...
Yeah. Do you get stuck in one part of your process where you're craving to go back to the other? Because I do.
Yeah. Because glazing is, I don't know, it's like this joke with ceramic people that nobody likes glazing.
Yeah.
It's really tedious and you don't know, it's all kind of like beige
Yeah.
until you fire it. And sometimes,
But then you have that moment of
you
discovery.
do, but often you
like,
open the kiln and it's not what you wanted and you have to do it again. And, but yeah, so the initial, really the building of the piece with clay is the fun part.
Yeah.
Or the carving, that's really fun.
Yeah. Super fun.
Yeah. Yeah. How are we doing?
I don't know. How are we doing time?
Oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
Oh, we're done? We're done.
Oh, that was your sign. Oh.
We have one question.
Okay, yeah,
Or multiple.
Yeah, I see something in the painting that feels like Chagall in the brushwork, or the freedom of the movement. Is that?
Is that an inspiration of mine? Is that what you
Yeah.
No, not directly.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there is a lot of flying kind of in this show, which probably subconsciously happened because I had a tough year last year. And I'm thinking that maybe like when I started working on things, I just wanted to have a lot of air and movement and get out of that. But I can't answer to that directly.
I see so much kinetic movement, and it's almost a musical form to it, and that storming and all kinds of drama going in and out. And actually, I was thinking of the Blue Rider group and their references to music, and some of the marks there kind of remind me of theirs. And was any influence there?
No. But I am obsessed with the idea of a symphony and how the single instruments and notes work together, just like I pick up pieces of paper that are this big, and then they become a part of this. I'm just kind of like, all you need is one note to start, and one note leads to the next, and to the next, and then you bring in instruments, and so I feel like the whole thing has a very symphonic feeling to me. But the theme of that, I'm just kind of in love with.
I'm Julia's dad, so I know her process pretty well. Okay, but I have a question for you, which is, and you kind of hinted at this, but if I look at that and then look at that, I'm not clear how you get from there to there. Could you talk more about that?
Sure. I can scale it up on a computer and make measurements.
Okay.
So I know exactly what the length is going to be of this piece, and I know every piece. You know, I scale it up, and I cut everything out in rectangles according to the size of what I'm going to need ahead of time, and then the seams are drawn loosely following the seams of the edges of the paper. And that's a hard process to dictate. I mean, tell you about unless you're a sewer. But even
I want to know how
I
you
can
keep the
see.
seams from puckering.
if they pucker, you resew them. I mean, there's a lot of resewing. Practice? I don't know. But I do, I mean, stretching a canvas helps. So, I guess.
You have formal training in
No.
sewing?
I didn't know how to sew these. I did not know how to, I had a quilting company at one point, and my partner sewed everything. I didn't know how to sew. But then when I figured out I wanted to make the collages into sewn works, I had to learn how to sew. So yeah, it was a lot of trial and error and puckering, and
Quilting company.
I had a quilting
Yeah,
company for a
that's
short time.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
In relation to age.
Yeah, but they were very geometric and structured, and yeah, and these obviously are so loose. Yeah. Anything else?
I have a question for Julia about your process. You have, and I'm wondering, are those little dots? You have dots that almost look like metal. Are those the control part or the?
No, yeah, those are those. I think what you're talking about are these little bits of bronze that I put on the sculptures.
Yeah.
So I work in bronze sometimes too, and when I go to the foundry, they let me take all these little remnants of like discard bronze, and I started firing those in the glaze firing on the sculptures as an experiment, and also to disrupt this idea of control. So I don't know what they're gonna do. I know like they'll turn this kind of gunmetal, dark green, black color, and I know they'll make a mess. That I've ruined a lot of kiln elements that way. But it's really exciting not knowing what's going to happen. And then I go back in and I polish them to make them shiny again. So I kind of feel like I'm creating this like artifact and then also revealing it through the process. And it's also conceptually really exciting. Like I'm doing like gold parts, which is like real gold that you fire on the luster, and then bronze, and then clay, which is dirt. So I'm kind of disrupting these hierarchies of material of the pieces.
Thank you so much.